Welcome back to Radio Entrepreneurs. I'm Jonathan Freedman alongside my co-host today, Evan Macedo, Sapers and Wallack. Always a pleasure to be on with you, Evan.
Always a pleasure to be here. It's always a gift to be on the show, so thank you.
Excellent. Evan, I know in your role as Vice President of Finance and Operations, you touch a lot of pieces within Sapers and Wallack, and today you've brought along one of your wonderful colleagues to impart some of the great wisdom that the folks at Sapers and Wallack provide. And love to hear from Jordan, our guest today, Jordan Smith, retirement outcomes consultant. So Jordan, if you will, you want to tell us a little bit about what it is that you do at Sapers?
Yeah, well, hey, nice to meet you all. Thank you for having me on the show. So I mean, I'll try and avoid the things that Evan has mentioned perhaps in the past, and I'll keep it more so to myself, my role, and what we do for both retirement and for financial wellness. And so I'm part of the retirement team for Sapers and Wallack. So on a day-to-day basis, we're helping plan sponsors in a fiduciary capacity to make their plan really as favorable as possible. And so that might include making sure that the funds that are within the 401k plan are top notch, they're the highest performing group, or perhaps even the lowest fee. And then across the board, holding ourselves in the capacity to really beat up the carriers to make sure that the fees across the board for the plans are as low as they possibly can be. Because at the end of the day, that's just, friction on the growth for your employees. And I think every employer would smile when they say they've helped, X amount of employees reach retirement and well before 70, which might be the average nowadays. So that's what we do on the retirement side. But my focus, in addition to that, is really on the financial wellness side, and I'm happy to or rather excited to talk about that today.
Absolutely, Jordan. Sorry, you go ahead, Jonathan.
No, go right ahead, Evan. I was going to jump right in on the financial wellness, but I'll allow you to do that, Evan. Go ahead.
Yeah, so you just mentioned financial wellness, and I know that's going to be a big part of today's show. We've been doing this for years. I know some other companies are just starting to do it, but for people who are not familiar with the wellness program, can you talk about what a wellness program is and what we're doing here at Sapers and Wallack?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so let's set the stage a little bit here. So, let me ask you guys this: have you guys seen any headlines in the news regarding credit card debt in America?
Just a little bit.
Yeah, just a little bit, right? Yeah, I mean, if you look at a graph of it, it's quite literally like you'd think it's SpaceX with how quickly it's taking off. So we're currently at $1 trillion of credit card debt. And that's just in America. That's just credit card debt. We're not talking mortgages. We're not talking, any other type of debt. But I'm sure if you want to toss in mortgages and student loans, the picture would look even more bleak for the American consumer. But really what that is an indicator of is the overall financial health of American citizens. And so what, some statistics that stand out to us is that, and these are all 2017 numbers, by the way. So 2020, post-pandemic, these numbers could not possibly look any nicer. But the statistics from 2017 is that 70% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck, which is just wild because that's that's almost 1 in every 4 individuals. And I'm sure us from working professionals, we might not be seeing that nearly as much as in our industries. But if you're walking down downtown Boston or wherever city you live in, there's a good chance that 3 out of every 4 people is actually living paycheck to paycheck. Isn't that crazy?
Well, what's not surprising and what's even more telling of late is with inflation, it's probably greater than that number. And one of the statistics, not to jump ahead, I hope I don't steal any thunder, but no, I've heard mention of a high income, and I know if we talk about national averages or medians, etc., it doesn't gets us to the point where six-figure earners. I think the numbers were staggering, like 40, 50, 60% of six-figure earners were living paycheck to paycheck. And so, it's even more pronounced that it doesn't matter what main street you're on, what town in America, you're probably running into people that are living paycheck to paycheck.
But have you ever read the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad?
Sure.
So, I mean, it's tough to avoid it. It's a bestseller for a reason. But and Evan, have you had a chance to read through?
No, it's something I have on my shelf that I need to pick up.
All right, I'll give you my copy just so you have no excuses. So in Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and I'll give you a little synopsis here, Evan. Rich Dad, Poor Dad, he goes through a number of different kind of paradigm shifts in terms of the way he sees people approach their personal finances versus how he and, what he labels as his rich dad, proceed with their personal finances to make them successful. And he has a lot of great lessons in there. Certainly the one that stuck out to me was how to accurately determine what an asset is. But one of the earliest concepts that he brings up is this idea of cash flow. And, being in the finance industry, we may all have heard of cash flow, right? It's it's the free money that might be coming in and out of a business. But when we look at it from an individual perspective, it can really be summarized as simply as cash flow is your income minus your expenses. And what he says in the book is that cash flow is your financial report card. You don't really get grades for your finances. You might get grades for your education. You might get grades on exams, entry exams, going into college, or even going into your industry. But there's never really a litmus test for your personal finances. But that's why cash flow is such an important number to be paying attention to, because it really is that. It's always been there, right? It is that report card that shows if your cash flow is high, then you're doing really well. If your cash flow is low, or God forbid, negative, then you really, are kind of failing on the personal finance side. And so, Jonathan, the reason, why I'm bringing this all up and why I love the point that you just brought up is that is exactly what what you described with, it really doesn't matter what main street you live on, whether it's the high rises or all the way in industrial town. The reality is that all because your income is high doesn't mean that your expenses are low. And what we see statistically is that when people receive an income increase, it's typically met with an appreciable amount of increase to their expenses as well. And so when we look at that cash flow calculation, it's very simple to increase cash flow. We only have two levers to pull, right? We can increase our income or we could decrease our expenses. But what I have found, and this is where, financial wellness really comes into play, and I preach this message in a lot of my webinars, is that I've found that people focus a bit too hard on the income side, which leads them to be financially dependent, right? Because in order to increase your income, you have to, maybe petition for or negotiate a higher wage. You may have to go back to school. You may have to take 2, if not more, jobs. And so that doesn't really seem like you have a lot of control over that component of your cash flow, right? You're kind of dependent on somebody else to provide you that income source. On the other side of things, when we look at expenses, well, your expenses are quite literally dependent on you. So if you want
choices.
You're right, exactly.
Choices. Yeah. It's quite an adult concept, but many people don't find choices. I want everything.
I want this, I want that. I just got paid. Let's go have fun, right? And hey, we're all culprits of that crime. So, it's not something to point a finger at, but the reality is that people focus a bit too much on the income side, when in all reality, if you want to gain financial independence and you want the easy path to increase your cash flow and increase your financial report card, focus in on your expenses so that you can, limit the amount of money that's getting taken out of your paycheck month to month. So to kind of tie this all back together, right? And so why might this be relevant to personal finance is that, Jonathan, you and I have read that book. Evan, we're waiting for you to get on there, and I'm sure you will soon after this call. But what I would describe the knowledge in that book, as well as the knowledge of just cash flow as a concept, that's financial literacy, right? And so when we talk about financial wellness, it's not really a product. It's a byproduct of increasing your financial literacy. Because if you are aware of these concepts, then naturally your first impression is to be, well, I got to start looking at my personal finances, start looking at my expenses, and start increasing my cash flow. But not everybody knows that. In fact, going back to those 2017 statistics, 54% of Americans are not getting financial advice. And the real rub of it is that for the folks who really need this financial advice, the folks who are living paycheck to paycheck, well, this information, this literacy exists, but it's typically always behind a paywall, right? Because folks in their industry need to get paid too. We can't just provide free information. But at the end of the day, the folks who need it to be able to pay for that service don't have enough money to pay for that service. So the rub of financial literacy and financial wellness in America is not that we don't understand it. It's that we don't have somebody footing the bill to bridge that gap. And so that's really where I come in with, employers, and on the employer level say, hey, there are all these wonderful statistics that show that if you provide these benefits, employees do respond to it well. I'm trying to find the statistic right now. I think it's either 84% or 9.
It's really fascinating,
ahead.
Jordan. One of the things that I've often found a fault, and one can fault the educational system dramatically, but there's really no formal education to financial independence that is ever created that I can think of, unless perhaps you take this one-off course in college, which probably very few people do, and it's really a byproduct in many cases of your upbringing. I've been exposed in work that we do. We work with a lot of family businesses. There's some people that parents never have a financial conversation with their offspring. There's others that ingrain it in their kids from a very young age. And so, in order to level that playing field or establish some baseline, if you will, it's virtually impossible because people come at it from such different orientations and experiences. I could see, not with too much disclosure, in my own family, my wife's upbringing versus my upbringing. It's quite clear that they were very different. And it can present a lot of challenges in relationships of how do you reconcile that and then pass it to the next generation and create some degree of financial literacy. I could see it being very challenging on a grand scale, and the value that you guys provide in terms of trying to bring it to organizations to say, hey, this is another part of how we want to not only educate, but develop our people, not for today, but for the future. And leave with or provide for them, I assume, a set of tools, a toolbox, to be independent, irrespective of where they may work. They're taking what the knowledge that's imparted upon them by you guys, and if they don't work for that organization 5 years down the road, hopefully they have a foundation or they have more literacy or capability and understanding.
You hit the nail on the head. And yeah, I mean, financial literacy in the household is a whole nother topic that we'll have to leave for another day. But I mean, how many, just even if with your upbringing, Jonathan, it sounded like you might have the upper leg on your spouse there, but tell me truly, how many misconceptions about credit and credit cards have you had to kind of snuff out throughout your lifetime?
Oh, it happens all the time. And I think, it really depends on, I've got a little gray to prove it. Parents who maybe were born or lived through the Great Depression and, were credit averse and didn't understand levers and things of that nature. So, it's fascinating to see and to watch. And, it's very hard mold to break out of. If you're conservative, fiscally conservative, it's very hard to be, outgoing and spend money wantonly. Those are things that I think are deeply ingrained in people. If you never paid attention to money and didn't sort of understand the mechanics of it, I think it's a very hard cycle to break for people. We're really talking about habits, which, as we know, are core and take a long time to develop and even longer to break when they're bad.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think you have a great point there in terms of just, things change in the marketplace, right? So, I mean, I like to think of the economy as a stage play, and you can either focus on the story that's being told, or you can focus on the characters that are being portrayed. And what I mean by that is, perfect example is interest rates, right? Back in, the 70s and 80s, putting money into a savings account in a CD was perfect. I mean, you could get a great interest and really retire off of just a certificate of deposit.
Double digit returns on CDs, on safe sort of investment vehicles. Pretty amazing. I remember those days. I remember getting growing up in Canada, provincial bonds at 18%. It was like, wow. Why wouldn't you put all your money in there?
Right. I mean, hey, if I ever finish the time machine, what time period I'm going back to.
Absolutely. But we've come to another cycle as interest rates have risen. And back to your earlier point, those people living paycheck to paycheck, when interest suddenly is trebled or quadrupled, and you're paying 22 or 25 or God forbid 28% on a credit card, it's not to see how it's difficult to get out from under.
Right. But then it's so interesting because there's basically two stories being told, right? I mean, there's the story of, hey, I can't really afford all these increases in payments because of interest rate hikes. But then on the other side, you could be like, well, I could never be happier. I mean, I can have a risk-free return of 5.25% on my money. Like, that's wonderful. Today is the best day ever, right? So that's why I think it's so important to focus on the characters, as in, interest rates, the equities market, certain tax levies and tax breaks, all those different players that have always been in this play. But the story always changes. So you need to focus on what character is playing which role and what role they've played in the past. And I think financial literacy really is a good kind of bringer of that knowledge in terms of saying, hey, don't look at the story. Don't look at what's being portrayed to you right now. Look at what each character is doing and what they've done, and look at how each of their own story plays out, which has gotten us to this point right now. And that's certainly like a higher level, that we hope to get people to in our financial wellness programs. So, really, there's just such a depth of knowledge that's here, and it really changes ongoing. So there's always going to be a need of financial wellness. And I'm so excited that more and more employers are realizing this and putting a focus towards, basically, taking the obligation that the government failed to do in public schooling by not providing us this valuable education.
Wonderful stuff. We could probably talk about this for hours on end. Given that our time is limited today, tell us how people reach out to you. What's the best way to engage with you guys over at Sapers and Wallack for one of these services that you offer? Is this a standalone service that somebody can engage with Sapers and Wallack for? Is it an add-on service that your existing clients benefit from? How does it work? And rolled into that question, what's the best way for people to reach out to you guys?
Yeah. So answer is it's both. I mean, we can add it as a add-on service for our retirement plans, but it is its own benefit. So, I mean, if you are an employer that wants to engage in this, this growth and this development of your workforce, I'd say best way to get in contact with me is via LinkedIn. You're welcome to shoot me a message. My LinkedIn would be linkedin.com/in/build-more. And if you want to reach out to our retirement team specifically, or if you want to just learn more about Sapers and Wallack, you can reach us at sapers-wallack.com, spelled as it is on the screen. But if you're listening to this with no visuals, it's SAPERS WALLACK.com.
And then I would also put on top of that, if you're looking for a financial wellness program, we can do a survey of your staff to figure out what's important to them. We have a whole menu of fantastic education sessions that Jordan and some other team members put on, along with some one-on-one criteria meeting settings that we'll do to give people that more personal touch. And our goal is to increase everyone's financial literacy over time to make sure that they're making smarter moves. And if employees are in a better financial spot, they'll be happier and they'll be more efficient at the jobs that they're doing.
Excellent. Good stuff, guys. Really appreciate having you on. Jordan Smith, Retirement Outcomes Consultant, Sapers and Wallack. Evan Macedo, Vice President of Finance and Operations at Sapers and Wallack. Always a pleasure to have you as a co-host and have you on Radio Entrepreneurs. And we'll be right back with another segment on Radio Entrepreneurs.